come to the dark side. Hello everyone, I'm Sarah from Everyday Starlet. Welcome to my channel. I make videos to inspire you to be the star of your own life. I am so excited about today's video because I have a huge announcement, and also I'm talking about dark feminine energy, which is one of my favorite topics. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about dark feminine energy, and I have a whole video where I dive really deeply into dark feminine energy on my channel. It's a very popular video, and a lot of you have been requesting more about dark feminine energy. So this video is going to be focused on the dark feminine energy archetypes. So if you want to dive deep into the basics of dark feminine energy, watch that original video. I'll link it to this one. But in this video, I'm going to focus on the dark feminine energy archetypes. And I'm also going to talk to you about exciting news and a way that you can connect to your own dark feminine energy with my dark feminine energy guided journal. The link for that will be in the description, and I will dive into that deeper later on in the video. But it's a passion project I've been working on, and so I'm so excited to finally share it with you. Just a basic overview of dark feminine energy. Dark feminine energy is really it's the dark parts of our feminine energy. I think oftentimes femininity teachings and your feminine energy goddess teachings tend to be much more light. They tend to focus on, the light, happy, sweet, submissive, good girl aspects of our feminine energy, which is great. It's beautiful. I love my light feminine energy. But honestly, dark feminine energy is so powerful. It's so beautiful. It really is where so much of our feminine power comes from, which is one of the reasons why it tends to be very suppressed in today's society. So as much as I encourage women to absolutely connect to your light feminine energy, because so many women are just caught up in this very masculine existence, and I definitely want people to connect to their light feminine energy. And I have a ton of videos talking about the different light feminine energy archetypes and stuff like that. But if that's all you focus on and you never tap into your dark feminine energy as well, you're missing out. You're doing yourself a disservice, because there's so much power and beauty in our darkness as well as our light. And this is nothing to do with any kind of satanic, devil worship, black magic, evil, anything. Is nothing to do with that. The dark feminine energy always comes from a place of love. It's just not afraid to get messy while it's doing it. So if you want to know more about the divine feminine archetypes, I have a video where I actually analyze Elle Woods from Legally Blonde in terms of how she embodies all of the divine feminine archetypes. I want to talk about the dark side. I want to talk about the dark feminine energy archetypes. I'm going to talk about each one, also what their light feminine energy equivalent is, although there definitely is some overlap. The divine feminine archetypes have some dark and light within them as well. Some of these archetypes are actually widely accepted as being archetypes, and some of them are ones that I kind of created myself. And when it comes to archetypes, we all contain all of the archetypes within us, and we can access any of them that we want to, or any of them that we need to. And ideally, we should be connecting with and embodying all of them. It just depends on which one we're going to connect to at any given moment. It just depends on what's needed in that moment. But the reality is, most of us are going to feel more comfortable in certain archetypes than in other archetypes. If you connect to a certain archetype and you're like, yes, that's me, that's so me, I love being in that archetype, great, own it. I'm all for celebrating the things that are innately you. However, if there are certain archetypes that you're feeling I don't know, I'm scared of it, or I don't like that part of myself, or I don't like other women that express that particular archetype, that's usually a big clue right there. If that does come up for you, that's probably a sign that that's where you have some healing work to do. Embodying all of these archetypes, and also all of the light divine feminine archetypes and the dark feminine archetypes, they're all important. It's really great for us to have some of all of them. It's the ones that we kind of fear or maybe judge in other people or judge in ourselves. It's usually a sign that that's a place that you need to do a little bit more healing. Be patient with yourself. None of us are going to feel totally comfortable and perfect in all of them. They're just areas to work on. But also celebrate the ones that just come naturally to you too, because those are great too. I always think it's really great that when you're really gifted at something, go for it, embrace it, own it. But also, if you struggle with something, there can be power in that too. I've found in my own experience, and I've witnessed this in other people, that oftentimes their weaknesses and working on their weaknesses actually open up a door to their greatest strengths. So as I go through each of these archetypes, just pay attention to what you're thinking, what you're feeling. So let's get started with the dark feminine energy archetypes. The first dark feminine energy archetype I want to talk about is one that I've created myself, and I call it the sacred brat. This is your inner child shadow self. Now, shadow work is just a whole video topic in itself. It can be tied to dark feminine energy because a lot of dark feminine energy lives in the shadows. So doing shadow work and doing dark feminine energy work complement each other wonderfully. So when I talk about your inner child shadow self, it's usually the part of yourself that when you were a child, you learned that you had to hide away. You had to hide in the shadows. You had to suppress. Probably something you got shamed for as a kid. I call it the sacred brat archetype because I know for me, as an only child, that was something that while I was growing up, my parents always had this thing where it was like, they would say it even too, like, oh, we can't let her be a brat because I was an only child. They were so afraid I was going to become a spoiled brat. As if that's the worst thing I could possibly be, right? It's like, okay, if she grows up to be a serial killer, that's one thing. But if she grows up to be a spoiled brat, God forbid, right? But if you actually break down the word brat, right, it involves owning your worth and knowing what you want. Like, there's aspects to being a brat that are absolutely important that you need to have, and the more that we suppress those things, the more we convince ourselves that we're unworthy, the more that we shame ourselves. I call it the sacred brat. You could call it something else. You were called bossy as a kid, or you were called greedy, or, you know, whatever it was that you were called as a child. Think about the sacred part of it. Think about the beauty. Think about the positive aspects of that, right? If you're greedy as a kid, what does that mean? You know what you want, right? That's a great thing. If you were stubborn as a kid, well, maybe you knew how to set boundaries. That could be a positive thing. And obviously there are negative aspects to things, like you don't want to be cruel to others, you don't want to be mean to others, but there's also aspects of those qualities that we label onto children, or we had labeled on ourselves as children, that can also be really positive. So when working with your sacred brat archetype, it's really important to kind of look at what were the things in childhood that you felt ashamed of, that you feel like you can own, that you can take out of hiding and maybe own that about yourself. Because let's be real, we don't all have to be perfect. And often that quest for perfection can very often turn into people pleasing. It can turn into not knowing how to set our own boundaries. It can turn into us being walked all over, or not owning our worth or owning what we want. These things are really important. So I call this the sacred brat archetype. And honestly, what comes to mind when I think of this archetype is Tinkerbell. She really comes to mind, and it's funny because she is like a very like light, beautiful fairy, but she's also kind of a brat, you know what I mean? Like she knows what she wants. She is not afraid to have a temper. She's not afraid to, you know, get stubborn, angry, you know, freak out. Like, I don't know, I love that about her. She's this beautiful magical fairy, but she also is willing to have a temper tantrum. She's willing to be spoiled and know what she wants. And she does get kind of dark in a lot of times. Like, she actually attempts to kill Wendy in the Disney movie. While I don't recommend doing that in real life, owning that part of yourself that's like, oh, I'm mad that this person got something that I really wanted. Well, I'm not saying go kill them, but you know what? If you need to like go and like punch some pillows and have a temper tantrum, you know, in your bedroom by yourself because you're upset that somebody else got something that you wanted, because you're in a jealous rage, or because you wanted something from someone that they just couldn't give you or didn't want to give you, like, it's okay to be upset about that. Like, let yourself be upset, because the more that you hold that in, the more it's going to build up and probably come out in other areas. And that's not your dark feminine energy. And I go into this more in the original video. When you are like suppressing everything inside of you, you're suppressing all your feelings, you're suppressing all your emotions, and then you like flip out on something that has nothing to do with what you're actually upset about, or on a person that has nothing to do with what you're actually upset about, that's not your dark feminine energy. That's not. But it's being able to express those dark feelings, those dark emotions, those things that come up for us that we probably suppressed in childhood because we were told that, you know, being upset about something maybe wasn't right, or speaking up in this moment probably wasn't right. I call this whole thing the sacred brat. The light feminine energy equivalent, I would say, is the maiden archetype. The maiden archetype is really your sort of, I think of it as like a Disney princess, kind of that really like optimistic, loving life, kind of beautiful, sweet, innocent, you know, wide-eyed, hopeful self that just dreams of the prince carrying her off and rescuing her. And I love the maiden. The maiden is a beautiful energy to be in. If we only possess the maiden, we can very often put ourselves in positions where we can get hurt, because the maiden doesn't know how to set boundaries. The maiden doesn't really know how to own her worth, because she sees the good in people. She sees the optimistic side of people. She loves love. She wants to be rescued. All these kind of beautiful things that can be lovely. But the sacred brat aspect, like the dark aspect, aspect of that youthful energy, that's the part you play in when you want to see the dark side, when you want to kind of start to learn how to own your boundaries, own your worth. Now, if you do start working with any kind of inner child work, I just want to make sure you know you're an adult. Like, you're an adult human in your body right now. But when you start working with your inner child, make sure you realize your inner child is still a child. Your inner child can't handle as much as your adult self can. So when you start working with your inner child, please be very mindful with your inner child. Speak to them in a loving way as you would a child that you want to care for. You don't want to get rough with your inner child because that'll just make things worse. So you need to be very patient with your inner child, especially when you're doing any kind of inner child work and when you're doing any kind of shadow work, really. If you do goddess work, when I think of something like the sacred brat, when I think of the sacred brat and the maiden energy, I think of like Persephone, which if any of you are familiar with the goddess Persephone, she was sort of like a light garden maiden half of the year, and she was queen of the underworld the other half of the year. So she's really great for doing shadow work because she really is the dark and the light. She's actually a really great goddess if you are working with goddess energy to work with when doing any of the dark feminine archetypes, but I kind of like to think of her as being like the shadow goddess because she does have the light and the dark. So if you are involved with goddess work, Persephone would be a great goddess to work with. The next dark feminine archetype I want to talk about is the wild mother. Now, this would be the dark feminine energy equivalent of the mother archetype. The mother archetype in divine feminine energy is your soft, nurturing mother. I always describe it as like the energy of like a warm hug or like a hot homemade soup. Like that would be the mother energy. The wild mother energy is the aspect of the mother, and I want to make it very clear that you don't have to actually be a mother. Like, you don't have to have given birth to children in order to embody this archetype. This is an archetype that we all have access to regardless of our parental status. But the wild mother is really more the energy of, I would say, the energy of childbirth. Having a baby is something that we kind of in our society all accept as being this you know, beautiful, you know, spiritual experience. But giving birth is something that's it's messy, it's wild, I mean, you're coming up against potential death. I mean, it's literally, you're kind of like dying to your old self as a woman, that, you know, a woman without a child to now being a woman with a child. And this doesn't necessarily have to be an actual child. This can happen in the process of adopting a child or taking on the role of a mother to another child. This could also be mothering something else in your life, a creative endeavor or something. I mean, this can be anything. You tend to go through this like birthing process that can be really messy and chaotic and wild. I think of the wild mother, I actually just witnessed right outside my window was a robin's nest. And so I got to watch these baby robins get hatched and watch the mother come around and feed them and then kind of lure them out of the nest. And she had to lure them out of the nest in order for them to fly and be their true self. The light feminine mother is going to want to hold her babies, and she's going to want to hold them and keep them safe and protect them. The wild mother knows you gotta push the babies a little bit in order for them to truly fly, in order for them to really be who they are. You need both in order to really be able to nurture and raise a child or any kind of thing that you are feeling like you want to be a mother to. Side note, this is not mothering energy. This has nothing to do with like mothering your partner, and I have a lot of videos diving into that. Mothering like your romantic partner, it's a whole other thing that's much more masculine energy. I'm not going to dive into that. This is actually talking about like divine mother energy. And when you talk about the dark aspect of mother energy, I call it the wild mother because I think of it more as the chaotic side of motherhood. The side that is okay with like a bunch of screaming children running around. It can handle the chaos of everything moving. The mother that can kind of like lure her child, again, out of the nest so that they can fly. The lioness who would fearlessly fight to protect her young, like that kind of thing. That's what I think of. When I was thinking of like wild mother characters, the character that kept coming to mind, which I'm gonna go with because it just keeps coming into my mind, is the fairy godmother from Cinderella. And I know that seems a little odd because she is so much light. Like, she is so much like lightness and magic. And so you would think of her as being a very light feminine archetype, but she's very chaotic. If you notice, she's kind of got this kind of like chaos, and she's so okay with, you know, kind of the chaos of everything. And she's also really like pushing Cinderella like into a new life. Like, she's really kind of you know, pushing her into this kind of like rebirth process, which, you know, it doesn't go completely smoothly the whole time she's trying to make things happen. So I don't know. And the idea that I think of the wild mother as also being like the god mother, like it's goddess mother. It's the godmother. It's the godmother in all of us. Like you can be that sort of wild mother for everybody. It's kind of like being a goddess mother to the world. You can think of it that way. If you work with goddess energy, Baba Yaga, I hope I'm saying that correctly. I read a whole book about her, which is amazing. She's a Slavic goddess. It's interesting because they mentioned it also in Women Who Run with Wolves, the story of her, and she kind of is seen as sort of evil, but she's not evil. She has a very sort of like wicked queen, but with a positive spin aspect on her. Like I think she might actually be where a lot of the wicked queen characters come from in like fairy tales and in Disney movies, but she's not really wicked. They love to portray dark feminine women as being wicked, which I'll get into in later archetypes. But yeah, working with that Baba Yaga energy, she's very much the wild mother. Like she's kind of crazy. If you really look into her, you learn more about her, she can be very terrifying, but it's all in the name of love. It's all in the name of helping people grow and to, you know, be that wild mother energy. I also would say if you're looking at like characters, it's hard because there's not a lot of characters that really give a positive representation of any of these dark feminine archetypes really. But I was watching some episodes of Bewitched, the sitcom, the old 60s sitcom, and Dora has a lot of kind of wild mother to her too. And it's funny watching, I used to watch that in like reruns when I was a kid, but like watching it now, I have a different perspective on it. It's like really weird watching like a sitcom from the 60s in today's mindset, but like I have such a different view of Endora and how much she, you know, she might be mean and cruel sometimes, but she's always doing it because she loves her daughter so much. And so yeah, that's I would say she would also be a great representation of the wild mother. I would also say the wild mother could also be connected to Maleficent, the version with Angelina Jolie, her portrayal of Maleficent, which is amazing. She's got a lot of wild mother in her as well. The way she mothers Aurora in a very sort of wild but dark but loving kind of way. I actually am going to use her as an example of another archetype later on, but a lot of these characters can be representative of multiple archetypes at the same time. Any character that is fully fleshed out and is multidimensional is probably going to be representative of multiple archetypes. Okay, the next dark feminine energy archetype is the wild woman. The wild woman is something that you also see in the divine feminine archetypes. She really is she can sometimes be referred to as the mystic as well. She's the one that is like unconventional, just absolutely wild. I love the term feral. The word feral has been coming up so much lately, and I'm loving that word. It's basically like that part of you that is totally connected to your animalistic side, to nature. Yeah, the wild woman is just wild. In fact, I actually just finished, it took me a long time, not because it wasn't a great book, but just because it's a lot of information and it's a very heavy topic. I just finished Women Who Run with Wolves, and that's really all about the wild woman archetype. A lot of people recommended it. It took me a long time to get through because it's a lot of information, but it really does dive really deep into the wild woman archetype, which I love because there's not a lot of real, true wild women that are shown in our media today. We just don't get to see that as much, which I think is a real shame, because it is such a beautiful part of us. It's the part of us that is really deeply rooted in nature. Like, we are nature. We are part of nature. We are connected to the cycles of nature. As women, we cycle with the moon. We are, you know, we are death and rebirth. We kind of go into a hibernation and come back. You can compare our menstrual cycles to the seasons and things like that. We go through seasons in our lives because we're always shifting and changing as people. We have a lot of animal instincts in us. It's that part of us that is our wild woman. And it really is difficult to find a really great, like, positive image of the wild woman in the media today, or in, you know, a character. I would say like Disney's Pocahontas. I know I keep going to Disney movies, but I do feel like they give caricatures, sometimes positive, sometimes negative, of some of these aspects, because they tend to be based on, you know, fairy tales or stories that have been told throughout history. But I would say Disney's Pocahontas because she's got such a connection with nature and a connection with the earth. I mean, Colors of the Wind from that movie is kind of like one of the ultimate odes to wild women. I would also say not her overall character, but I have a breakdown of And God Created Woman with Brigitte Bardot. And while her character has a lot of wounding and is often connected to the maiden and things like that, the scene in the movie, which is her iconic scene where she just sort of like dances with abandon, that's her wild woman coming out. That's her very animalistic wild woman that she's connecting with in that moment, connecting with that primal animalistic side of herself. If you're working with goddess energy, I associate the wild woman with Kali energy. I am always drawn to the goddess Kali in so many different ways for so many different things. She could also be a part of other archetypes as well. When I think of the wild woman, I think of my Kali energy. She would be the Hindu goddess Kali, she is death. She's dark. Like, she is really, really dark, and when you start working with her, things can get really dark and chaotic, but I find I always feel called to her. She could also be associated with other archetypes as well that I'll get into a little bit later. And I want to take this time to talk to you a little bit about my Dark Feminine Energy Guided Journal. In this journal, this is actually just a author's proof. I don't have the final copy yet, but it is live. The details are in the description box, so you can check out the link. It's available on Amazon. It's a guided journal. So a lot of this is going to be space for you to write your story and to work through things for yourself. In it, I have like a little overview of dark feminine energy, a little bit of poetry that I've written because I've been dabbling in a lot of poetry in my feminine energy journey. And each chapter is a different archetype. And in each one, you'll have a little description of what the archetype is. We'll go a little bit more in depth than what I'm talking about in this video. The wounds that are associated with that archetype, and a little bit more about the light feminine archetype equivalent. I'll also give a list with each one of different practices that will help you to connect with each archetype. And then there are just so many journal prompts, and there's just so much free space in here for you to just write. And I actually intentionally made these unlined, and I didn't number the pages. Like, I kind of went a little bit unorthodox with some of these things, and one of the reasons why I did that was because it's really hard to talk about feminine energy in book form. I know a lot of people ask me for book recommendations for connecting with your feminine energy. I have a video where I dive into some of my favorite books, and I probably should do an updated one because I've read a few more that I want to add to that recommendation list. But it is really difficult to learn about feminine energy from a book. Masculine energy is a little bit different because masculine energy is very much of the mind, so reading about it can actually help connect with it. But feminine energy really needs to be felt in the body. It needs to be experienced. And I really wanted a book that was interactive, that you could actually like kind of dive into and be part of the experience. And feminine energy is also chaotic. It's wild. I mean, I love lined journals and stuff because, you know, the sort of perfectionist in me that likes to make lists and stuff, which is my masculine energy, loves that stuff. But like, feminine energy is chaotic. Feminine energy is not about just like neatly writing things out. Like, I want you, if you're going through a journal prompt where you're getting like angry, maybe you write sideways. Maybe you just draw a sketch or doodle something, or like just, I don't know, get different colored markers or crayons or something and scribble or something. Or, you know, maybe when you're working with your inner child, maybe you want to work with a crayon and just write things out in a crayon or something like that. Anything. I just wanted to have like a ton of like open space with each journal prompt, so you could just like do whatever comes out. I wanted it to be very free flowing, and I wanted it to feel a little bit chaotic, like the feminine, because you can't connect with your dark feminine energy if you need everything to be sort of organized and perfect all the time. So yeah, so that is actually why I set up the book the way that I did. And yeah, this goes through all of the archetypes I'm talking about. To be honest, I really wanted to make like a dark feminine energy course because it's something I'm really passionate about. And I think it's just so important for so many women because there's so many mixed messages out there. There's so many like femininity coaches and femininity teaching that focuses on either just the light feminine energy or kind of on a more surface level stereotypical idea of what is feminine. But I feel like a lot of femininity teachings don't tap into the dark side of feminine energy, which is so needed. I mean, you can live in the light, which is amazing, but you also need to embrace the darkness. If you don't embrace the dark sides of your personality, if you don't embrace the dark feminine energy, you're missing out on a really important part of feminine power. And also, I'm seeing a lot of teaching, well, either about dark feminine energy, which is a little misleading because it tends to be more about like, oh, how to manipulate a man or something like that. And true dark feminine energy, when it's coming from like the divine feminine, is not about manipulating anybody. It's not about controlling anybody. It's not about hurting anybody intentionally. It is solely about love, but understanding that sometimes acting in the highest good of love and the highest good of all people can get messy. It can get chaotic. It can get dark. There might be casualties, and I don't mean actual, like, I'm not encouraging anybody to go out and actually like hurt people, but you know, people's feelings might get hurt. I think that's one of the reasons why people fall into people pleaser mode, is they're so terrified of potentially hurting someone they end up hurting themselves, that kind of thing. There's a lot of stuff online of people getting into their villain era. This book will help you get into your villain era, but do it from a loving place, not do it from like a manipulative place. It's for people that want to like let go of the good girl. They want to just get out of people pleaser mode. They want to learn how to set boundaries. They want to own their worth, but they want to do it from a loving, open heart. They don't want to actually go out and start hurting people. I know there's a lot of people that are obsessed with like the sprinkle sprinkle, and I'm not saying that there isn't something to that, but at the end of the day, I want people to really know how to connect to their inner power from a place of an open heart, not from a place of let's shut down, put a wall up, and try to use people because I feel like I've been used. I don't know, it's a whole other video with my ideas about that aspect of things, but I want women to feel like they can own their dark feminine energy because it is something that's suppressed in society, and I feel like it's a missing piece that we don't talk about, or we don't really talk about in a way that's going to be helpful to you, yourself, to the world, to the people around you. And I really wanted to create something that would help women really connect with their dark feminine energy from a beautiful, loving space. I always wanted to create a course, but I also know that I have courses online and a lot of people really want to take my courses. I hear from people all the time, but money is tight right now. Times are tough right now, and I know that a lot of people don't always have the ability to spend a lot of money on an online course, and doing something like this journal was a way of being able to connect to more people at a lower price point so that more people could have access to a lot of the healing work. So if you've been longing to work with me on some of this stuff, if you've been looking at some of my courses and been like, oh, I wanna work with you, but you know, doing a whole online course is just not really my budget right now. I understand. I never want to be one of those people that's like, oh, well, what's the price of standing still? And then you spend money on, you know, a product or a course or something, and then you can't afford to like feed your family or something. I don't ever want to put anyone in that situation. This was just a way that I could create something that could be, you know, a lower cost item that you're still going to get amazing, amazing healing work. These journal prompts are just like going to open up so much for you. And it was just a way for me to share this work and really help people connect to this stuff. You know, dark feminine energy, which is so important. And it's a way for people to do that. You can do this at your own time, at your own pace, and it's a lower price item so that you don't have to invest a ton of money in a course. If enough people really want me to create a course that dives into this stuff in more depth, let me know. I'm happy to do it. I just really wanted to get this this book out there because I do really think it's an important topic, and I really want to see more women really just step up, own their worth, step into their villain era from an open heart, and just really learn how to connect to their dark feminine energy from a loving place. So that's why I created this book. Link in the description box if you want to check it out. If you get the book, you love it, leave a review on Amazon. So excited for you guys to check this out. I'm really excited to hear about your breakthroughs and how dark feminine energy is actually helping you in your life. Okay, so the next dark feminine energy archetype I want to talk about is one that's probably going to be the most taboo, I would say, and that is your sacred slut. Now, I've heard this archetype referred to in many different ways. I chose the word sacred slut for this. Some people have called it sacred prostitute. I've heard other variations on it. I chose sacred slut because it made me a little uncomfortable because I've never been totally comfortable with the term slut. And I know there's a lot of people out there that have tried reclaiming that word and everything, and it always made me uncomfortable. So I was like, I'm gonna step out of my own comfort zone and I'm gonna talk about the archetype archetype in terms of the sacred slut. Now, before I dive into this, please understand that when I talk about the sacred slut, because the word slut is so powerful, don't think I'm ignoring the sacred part. I am not encouraging anybody to be promiscuous. That is not my message at all. Because you can't have the sacred part without owning, one, the beautiful innate power of your feminine body. When you truly own and embrace the power of your feminine body, not only how physically beautiful it is, but just how beautiful it is just overall. Internally, externally, everything about your feminine body is beautiful. It is powerful. We are literally portals to life. We are portals to new life. We are connected to the earth, to nature. We are part of Mother Nature. When you own that part of yourself, that sacred, beautiful part of yourself, you can't be promiscuous. You can't. Because when you own your worth that much, that you embrace the sacredness of your body, you will not be able to share that body with just anyone. You will not. Like, it will repulse you to share your unbelievably powerful body with a person who is not worthy. And I gotta be honest with you, there are not that many people in the world that you're gonna meet that are gonna be worthy. Also, the sacred part, because we tend to get caught up in the slut part, the sacred part. Sex is sacred. I'm not talking about this from some kind of a religious morality, purity, culture kind of way. I'm talking about the fact that anytime you have sex, really, no matter how safe it is, it has the potential to create new life. It's a sacred act, right? Not only does it have the potential to create new life, but there's energy shifts. There's sexual energy. Sexual energy is incredibly powerful. It's a powerful thing. And not only do you not want to potentially create life with just anybody that you meet every day, but you also don't really want to have an energy exchange with just anybody that you meet. I'm not trying to come from a purity culture aspect of like you have to wait until marriage, or, you know, you have to stay a virgin for a certain amount of time, or that you know, whatever. I mean, your decision as to who you sleep with and how many people you sleep with, you know, anything like that, that's your decision. It's your body. It's not for me to say. I would just encourage you, if you are going to embody your sacred slut archetype, don't forget the sacred part, because a lot of people are going to get hung up on the slut part. Remember the sacred part. That's just a really important PSA that I wanted to add in. The light feminine energy equivalent of the sacred slut archetype is the lover archetype. The lover archetype is sensuality. It can be sexuality as well, but it tends to be the beautiful, romantic, love-making aspect of sensuality. Whereas a sacred slut is like your sexuality. It's like the sexual part of yourself. I can't think of the comparison between like the lover and the sacred slut without thinking of like 50 Cent in the club. Like I'm into having sex, I ain't into making love, like that kind of thing. Like think about it like that. Like it's your sacred slut is the part that like wants to have sex, whereas like your lover energy is the one that wants to make love. Now ideally, when you are going to be intimate with someone, you would want both, right? Like you want to, you know, have the sex, but you want to also be doing it from a loving place. But the lover energy really would be, I mean, if you think about it, like, you know, wearing white and running through a field of flowers and like embracing your lover kind of thing. The sacred slut is the part that kind of wants to embrace the dark side of things. And feminine sexual fantasies can get very dark. A few things. One, I get much more into feminine sexual fantasies in my Belle de Jour breakdown, as well as my 50 Shades of Grey breakdown. But when I talk about sexual fantasies, I want to make sure that you know, when you're talking about sexual fantasies and things like that, your fantasies are a safe place. They're always a safe place because they're always consensual. Everything you do in your fantasy is consensual. Never means that anything that you fantasize about has to be done in real life. Maybe you decide to do some of it in real life. Your decision. But none of it has to be. When it comes to the sacred slut, there's kind of two camps really that people kind of fall into, generally speaking. There's either the side that is incredibly promiscuous, that's like really okay with the slut part, but like not okay with the sacred part. Usually people that dive into that area, and again, I'm not trying to make judgments, but usually people who are overly promiscuous tend to be people that are using promiscuity to distract from other aspects of their life and other things they don't want to deal with, in a similar way that people would use drugs and alcohol to kind of not feel their feelings. Samantha Jones from Sex and the City, prime example of that. She does that many times throughout the series. She'll, you know, not want to feel something she's feeling, so she tries to sleep with a guy. That's like too much of the slut part, not enough of the sacred part, right? On the other side tends to be the the woman who is just cut off from any of that completely. Like, she's just cut off from anything that has to do with her sexuality because, you know, she either doesn't feel safe being in her sexuality or she feels shamed for it. Oftentimes if you feel judgment towards other women who embrace their sexuality, tends to be because you are ashamed of that within yourself. We have a society where we definitely see women as being either like the good girl or the bad girl. I have other videos where I talk about that too, so I'm not going to dive into that too much because I don't want to spend the whole video talking about the sacred slut, which I really could. The sacred slut archetype is probably the most taboo and it's the most controversial, and oftentimes women either focus too much on the sacred, not enough of the slut, or too much of the slut, not enough of the sacred. As far as characters go, it's difficult because people always call like Samantha Jones like the lover archetype when they talk about this stuff, and I don't really see her as that at all. I see her as using her sexuality as like a wall, as a blockage, and I've talked about that in other videos. So I don't really see her as a healthy sacred slut either. I would say Belle de Jour from the movie Belle de Jour. I mean, that's a very complex movie, so I don't know if necessarily she's in the healthiest form of that, but she tends to be an example of a woman who is embracing all of her like dark sexual fantasies. But the sacred slut, honestly, a very controversial character. Most people are not comfortable with a woman owning her sexuality in a healthy way. I think we as a society are okay with women, you know, being repressed or being suppressed, being sort of like the good girl, or we accept that there are girls in society that are just like bad girls, what they call like for the streets or whatever. But like a woman who is fully embodying her sexuality, but from a healthy place in a society, we're not really ready for that yet, which is really kind of sad that we have not evolved to that point yet. But the fact that there are not a lot of really great examples of that in the media and, you know, in movies, TV, things like that, still have a long way to go. If you're working with goddess energy, Lilith. Lilith is like a whole topic within herself, so I'm not going to dive into her too much. But if you are working with goddess energy, Lilith is your sacred slut goddess for sure. If you do want me to do a video more about goddesses and things like that, any individual or just generally speaking about working with goddess energy, let me know. I'd be more than happy to make a video about that. Okay, the next dark feminine energy archetype is the witch. Talk about a word, kind of along the lines of slut, talk about a word that's very controversial. It's weird. It's weird how controversial this is because it's so common. I mean, if you think about it again, like I said before, I was watching Bewitched, which touched on the witch aspect in the 1960s, but it was still very taboo. But we've also had, you know, kind of lighthearted sitcoms like Sabrina the Teenage Witch, and, you know, we've had like witch in our culture a lot. And sometimes it's seen as, I mean, there's the Good Witch, the Hallmark movies that turned into a TV show. You know, the witch can be portrayed in a good way or a bad way, but we also have a lot of negative terms. Like, people think of witchcraft as being devil worship. The Wiccan religion does not even actually believe in the devil, which is a whole other topic. I'm not going to dive into that. I'm not talking about like switching to a Wiccan religion or anything like that. The witch archetype, which again gets a really bad name in fairy tales, the Wicked Witch and things like that. This is not about like, you know, ear of newt and eye of salamander or something mixing in a bottle, or like, it's not about like, you know, hocus pocus where they're trying to like steal the souls of children. Like, that's not what I'm talking about. The witch archetype is connected to the light archetype of the wise woman. Could also be considered the mystic, depending on how you use the terminology. It's really about connecting with nature. It's about using nature and using all the properties of nature to work with in your everyday life. So the witch would be your medicine woman. It would be your midwife. Witch could be a gardener. The witch could be, you know, they have kitchen witches and things like that. It's basically working with the earth. I would say if you are someone who grows your own tomatoes and then you take those tomatoes and you cut them up and you make a tomato sauce, you could say you're tapping into your witch energy. You're taking something from the earth and you're using it to nourish your body. You know, maybe have an aloe plant in your house and you can cut off some of your aloe leaf and you can use it to help a sunburn or something. Like, that would be tapping into your witch energy. It could also be working with crystals. It could be working with the cycles of the moon. It's basically taking nature. Now, the wild woman is, you are nature. The witch really is taking nature and making it work for you. all of the beautiful things that are in nature and making it work for you. And in the divine feminine archetype, when you have the wise woman, a lot of that is about ancestral knowledge, tapping into your intuition, which for the witch is the same thing. Like, you absolutely are tapping into your intuition and things like that. I would say the wise woman and the witch is very similar. And the witch isn't really specifically dark per se, although I would say that the witch aspect is a little bit more getting your hands dirty, like actually like digging in the mud and actually like, you know, getting down with the earth, as opposed to the wise woman, which I think of more up in the headspace. So it just more, I mean, if you work with chakras and stuff, like the wise woman would be more of your third eye intuition, whereas the witch would be a little bit more connected to your womb. So it's really just like upper chakra versus lower chakra. I won't get into the chakras. If you want me to do a whole video talking about the chakras, I will. I'm not going to dive into that because that's like a whole other topic. The main reason why I connect the witch with more of your dark feminine energy is more because it's so taboo in today's society, which is weird because if you think about it, it really is getting back to nature and getting back to things that our ancestors used to use as healing properties and as, you know, medicine, food, nutrition, all kinds of things, natural childbirth, like things that were a part of our society for generations. But nowadays, with our pharmaceutical companies and our, you know, big food and, you know, all this kind of whatever, that stuff is considered like alternative medicine. The new stuff isn't considered alternative, but the old stuff is considered alternative. So it's not so much that the witch archetype is like dark per se, it's just very controversial, which is weird that it's controversial. It just is. So when you are connecting to your witch archetype, don't start freaking out and thinking that you're gonna have to start doing some like weird stuff to cast evil spells on people. That's not what this is. It's really about tapping into nature and what you have access to in nature and making that work for you. If you think about it, like if you decide to take a bunch of herbs and mix them together in a warm soup and give them to your true love, is that really different than a love spell? It's putting together things in nature and gifting it to someone that you love. It may not be like a spell in the sense of like, you know, Samantha Stevens and wiggling her nose, for those of you that are old enough to remember Bewitched. You know, it's not like a big cauldron, but you know, it's a pot and you mix some herbs together. You make something that you feed to your family. It's a love spell. It's giving them a gift of love, you know. It also could involve like ceremonies, you know, making everyday life into a ceremony and making it into a ritual. Who's to say that's not magic? You know, it might not be magic in the sense of like, you know, having a rabbit jump out of a hat or something. But you know, there's magic in it. There's magic in everything in life. I started gardening this summer, which is totally outside of my comfort zone. It was really my way of tapping into my witch. And I'm someone who used to like freak out if I saw like a worm, and now I've literally been like digging in the dirt and like it's a totally new experience for me. It's one of the motivating factors in actually creating this book, because I really was tapping into all of those parts of myself that were kind of hidden away. And I gotta tell you, like planting a seed, like taking some dirt and planting a seed and then like watering it and watching it grow, like burst open into, you know, a flower or an herb tree or something like that. You can't tell me that's not magic. Like there's magic in that, there's beauty in that, and this little teeny tiny seed, and then this beautiful, you know, flower comes out of that. That's magic. And to think that you were the one who planted that, you can't help but feel like a magician. I mean, I felt like a magical garden witch every time I saw something that I planted and nurtured grow into something beautiful. That's the witch energy. So there's nothing wicked about these witches. So anytime you see like a wicked witch in fairy tales, it's not what I'm talking about. The witch archetype, I mean, The Good Witch on Hallmark, which I actually went through and I watched the movies, which I really liked. I've seen some of the show. The show felt a little flat for me. I saw the first few seasons of it, but it does show, it's very subtle. They don't really call her a witch in the whole series, but you know, she is kind of the healing, the herbs. She's very unconventional. She's not afraid to do something a little bit different. She's not afraid to go head to head against, you know, Western medicine, things like that. I think that would be a great example. I have a film breakdown of Chocolat. I would actually say that the main character in that movie, she creates a chocolate shop, but she's definitely got a lot of witch energy. She comes into this very conservative Catholic town and she shakes things up. You know, she really kind of helps people tap into a more sensual side of themselves through chocolate. She uses her intuition a lot. She definitely has a lot of witch in her for sure. And again, it's not so much that this energy is like dark energy, it's more that it is unconventional in today's society, and you kind of need to be not afraid to stir up the pot to tap into your witch energy. 2 more archetypes to go, and our next dark feminine energy archetype is the warrior huntress. In divine feminine energy, we call it the huntress, and pretty much the same thing. The warrior huntress and the divine feminine huntress are pretty much the same. And the reason why I categorize this as dark feminine energy is because honestly, if you're gonna hunt something, if you're gonna be a warrior, you have to be afraid to get a little messy. This doesn't necessarily mean that you have to actually go out and be a soldier. It doesn't actually mean that you have to even physically fight. Oftentimes when it comes to feminine energy, the sort of huntress warrior in us oftentimes is an internal battle. It loves to slash egos, our own and other people's. I like to think of it as like, for example, if you are starting to speak negatively of yourself, can you imagine taking your sword or whatever weapon you choose that makes you feel powerful and just like destroy that negative thought? Just like destroy it. That's like more like baseball. You could beat it with a baseball bat too. I don't know. It's a negative thought. Do whatever you want. It's also your anger, your rage, that part of you that wants to fight. Own it. Own it. Embrace it. A prime example of the warrior huntress, the Gal Gadot version of Wonder Woman, really just an unbelievable representation of really all the feminine archetypes, but it really shows a woman who can embrace all of her feminine archetypes, but also is primarily a warrior huntress. And she's fighting for something greater than herself, which is typically a masculine energy idea. I would say the warrior huntress, as well as the divine feminine huntress, which is really the same thing, is really the most masculine out of all of the archetypes. But it's a healthy masculine energy. It's not a masculine that is trying to fight to like take over the world because they want it for their own selfish ego. It's really that energy of fighting for something greater than themselves, for fighting to protect. But as a woman, you often have to connect to that rage inside you. We do, as women, have more leeway and more ability, generally speaking, to express emotion than many men do. Growing up, little girls, it's a little bit more acceptable for us to cry than it is for little boys. I will accept that. However, when it comes to rage, anger, emotions like that, little girls not really allowed to do that, right? Little girls are not typically allowed to express that, which that can also go back to your sacred brat archetype if that's something that comes up for you as far as childhood goes. But in this archetype, being able to connect to your feminine rage, the feminine storm inside you, is crucial. Because how do you know what you're passionate about if you're not able to connect to that? I don't ever encourage people to like harm somebody else with their rage. And again, it's important to know the difference between like your traumas and triggers and your actual rage, which I dive into more in my original video about dark feminine energy, so I'm not gonna dive into that too much. However, when that rage, that emotion comes up, a lot of times it's a signal to you. Something's up here. There's something that you care about or something that you feel really strongly about. Listen to that. That's your body telling you something. So a lot of that is connected to your warrior huntress. And I would say if you're working with goddess energy, Kali is classic. I do know that if you're looking at Hindu goddesses, like Durga is a big one. Personally, I connect more to Kali, so that's more the one that I work with when I'm looking to tap into that energy. But there's no wrong answers. It's whichever goddess you want to work with if you are doing goddess work. And the final dark feminine energy archetype is the dark queen. She would be the dark version of the divine feminine energy of the queen. And now queen energy, typically when we're talking about the divine feminine, the light feminine, the queen tends to be often associated with the king. She does not have to have a king, so to speak, but she oftentimes is partly defined, at least, by having a king and ruling alongside of him. That's all great. It's all wonderful. You know, all of these archetypes, all of these energies have nothing to do with whether or not you're single, whether or not you're in a relationship. This is all for you because it's internal to you. The dark queen stands in her own power. She stands in solidarity. She stands herself. Doesn't mean she can't be in a relationship. Doesn't mean that she can't have a king. However, the dark queen aspect is the one that is in sovereignty with herself. In fact, if she is in a relationship, one of the ways I would describe the difference between like sort of your light queen and your dark queen is the light queen, if she stands with a king, when he is, say, out of alignment, maybe he's in his ego or something, even if he's a good man, but he's out of alignment or he's in his ego, he's not really being his he's being like a human man, like a human man. Like, who likes human men, right? Like, we want the divine masculine in our men, right? But he's being like a human egotistical man, right? The light queen want to continue to open her heart to love because she's longing for that divine masculine in him. She sees beyond that. She sees the divine masculine that he is. However, the dark queen ain't gonna tolerate some kind of human male ego thing. No, not gonna happen. The dark queen will only accept that which is the divine masculine in her partner. And she will not tolerate less than that. And what that looks like what she does, you know, it might be walking away. It might be crying. It might be getting angry. It might be anything. It's whatever called for in that moment, depending on the circumstance. The dark queen is also about feminine leadership, which I have a lot of videos talking about that too, but feminine leadership is a little bit different than masculine leadership, whereas masculine leadership is leading by direction, telling people what to do. Feminine leadership is more about inspiration, showing people what's possible. Neither one is right or wrong. Both of them are important to have if you are going to be a leader. However, it's just knowing when is the right time to be in masculine leadership and when is the right time to be in feminine leadership. But the dark queen, because she is so sovereign and can stand in her own sovereignty, is a natural feminine leader. I actually, when I think of characters, because the dark queen, again, like a dark queen would be somebody that we would associate with like a wicked queen. This isn't wicked. It's not wicked, it's not evil, it's not anything. The dark queen is powerful, so many people fear her. I just rewatched Maleficent the other day, the Angelina Jolie version, and I know I mentioned her with the wild mother because she has a lot of wild mother in her, but like, wow, she really embodies the dark queen to me. You know, she was dealing with this man who was so in his ego, and she was just not going to tolerate it. She was not going to tolerate like a human man just in his ego, and I think that was such a great representation of that. So I love that character because it is really rare to have a great representation, a positive representation of the dark queen in our society today, because she's so powerful, and we're really not comfortable as a society with a woman who can stand in her own sovereignty. And that doesn't mean that you can't be in a relationship. It doesn't mean you can't be in a wonderful, loving relationship. I would argue that you can potentially be in a better relationship because you do have your own grounded sense of self, so you're much less likely to lose yourself in a relationship and end up resenting the other person. You're much more likely to choose a partner because this person is aligned with you than you are to choose someone out of desperation or need. I would argue that, you know, having your own sovereignty and connecting to these aspects of yourself in the dark feminine, because as much as the feminine is about community and connection, there are more aspects of the dark feminine that tend to be a little bit more solitary. That can be a good thing, because if you are comfortable in your own self, being with yourself, you're more likely to find a partner that matches with you. None of this dark feminine energy is about needing to be single or staying single, but it's also not about desperately needing a partner or desperately needing to stay with a partner because you need to have someone in your life. It's about owning yourself so that when you do get into a partnership, if you choose to, you're doing it from a place where you know yourself and you know what it is that you want, and you also know your worth. As far as the dark queen, I would say Lilith as well. I mean, you could do a whole video just on Lilith, but while she is a lot more of the sacred slut, I would say she also embodies the dark queen for sure. There's probably a lot more. I'm not fluent in all the goddesses, and there's probably some I'm forgetting about in this video. So if you guys have any goddesses that you work with as suggestions, let me know. If you want me to do a video where I talk about some of the goddesses that I like to work with, or some recommendations for you, let me know that too. You know, if you have any other character suggestions that go with any of these archetypes that you really like, let me know that too. I'd love to know like which archetypes, maybe the archetype that you feel the most comfortable with and the archetype that you feel the least comfortable with. I'd love to hear that. Yeah, and don't forget to check out my journal. I am so excited for this because I'm so excited for the people that are going to get to go through this journal, go through the journal prompts, try some of the practices, and I'm really excited to see more women truly own and accept like the dark side of their feminine energy, because light feminine energy is beautiful. I love light feminine energy, I absolutely do, but there's something about dark feminine energy, man, that just the world needs it right now. The world is living so much from ego in so many different ways, and the dark feminine energy can destroy ego, and I really do feel like we need more of that, and we need women to connect with that part of themselves. So be sure you check out the journal. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please give it a big thumbs up, and be sure you subscribe to my channel. If you missed one of my previous videos where I talked about not being able to do my film scene breakdowns anymore because of some copyright issues, I actually was banned from TikTok. I have a new TikTok account, link is in the description box if you want to follow me there. I'm trying to grow that again from scratch because of everything. So I'm gonna kind of be going in a little bit different direction. I have tons of film breakdowns on here. I might have to take a little bit of a break from that. I might do a few of some more pop culture type of shows or movies that I know people have more access to or are more familiar with, so I don't feel like I need to put scene breakdowns in them. But if you have any like video topics that you want me to do, anything like that, pop culture things you want me to talk about, let me know. Comment in the comment section below. I'd love to hear from you, and I love your suggestions. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you join me next time.